What would you do if you came home and found your own mother giving strangers a tour of your brand new house with a key you never gave her? That's exactly what happened to me, and it changed everything. If you've ever had family cross the line, or witnessed a moment where love turned into control, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below, let me know where you're watching from, and stay with me because this story only gets more intense. The morning air in Columbus carried that sharp winter bite, the kind that makes every breath sting just a little before it warms in your chest. I tightened my coat around me, but it wasn't the cold that sent a shiver down my spine. In my hand, resting heavy and solid, was a brand new key. Not just any key, the key to my very first home. For 34 years, I had lived under the weight of other people's expectations. My parents' house, then dorm rooms with surprise inspections from my mother, then an apartment just minutes away from their front door. Independence, for me, had always been a borrowed illusion, like a teenager sneaking out the window only to be caught when the floorboards creaked. But now, standing in the driveway of a 1922 Colonial tucked into a quiet street in Oakwood, I felt something I had never truly tasted before: freedom. The house wasn't extravagant by anyone else's standards. 2 stories, original hardwood floors, a small bay window that begged for a reading chair, and a modest backyard where I could already imagine sipping coffee in the spring. But to me, it was a palace. Every inch of it had been earned through years of saving, budgeting, and denying myself little luxuries so one day I could afford something that was truly mine. I had kept the entire process a secret. My family believed I was taking a night class on financial planning every Tuesday and Thursday. In reality, those evenings were filled with house showings, mortgage calls during lunch breaks, and whispered conversations with my realtor, Diane. I didn't tell a soul. I knew what would happen if I did. My mother would critique every neighborhood. My father would quietly side with her. My brother and his wife would chime in about which floor plan worked best for family gatherings. My choices would drown under their voices until nothing left belonged to me. So I did it alone. I signed the papers in a quiet coffee shop on a Wednesday morning, telling my office I had a doctor's appointment. Diane slid the documents across the table with a proud smile. "Congratulations, Lauren," she said. "This space is yours on your terms." On my terms. The words rang in my ears like music. I wanted to shout, to laugh, to cry. Instead, I drove to the house, pulled into the driveway, and sat for a long moment with the engine off, staring at the front door. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The click echoed through the empty rooms like a promise. Stepping inside, I felt the silence wrap around me, not heavy and suffocating like the quiet in my parents' home, but soft, almost sacred. I ran my fingers along the cool plaster walls. No one could tell me how to paint them. I opened cabinets in the kitchen, already picturing my mismatched mugs. No one could reorganize them when I wasn't looking. For once in my life, my space would reflect me, not anyone else. I carried in a single box that first day books, mostly the ones I had read in college, the ones my mother used to call a waste of time because they weren't practical. I stacked them in the bay window, where the sunlight poured across the hardwood. It wasn't much, but it was a start. My start. Yet even as joy pulsed through me, guilt pressed in. What would my mother say when she found out? What tears would she shed about being left behind? What accusations would my father level about loyalty? A lifetime of conditioning made me pause, second-guessing whether this independence was worth the storm it might unleash. But then I remembered Vanessa's face, my sister-in-law, when Mom tore apart the house she and my brother had loved, calling the ceilings too low and the windows impractical. I had sworn then I would never let my dream be dismantled the same way. That night, I locked the door behind me and held the keys tight in my hand. My house, my rules, my sanctuary. Still, as I lay on an air mattress in the empty bedroom, staring at the ceiling, a single thought cut through the quiet like a knife. How long can a secret like this really stay hidden? Growing up in the Collins household meant never truly belonging to myself. Privacy wasn't just scarce, it was forbidden. My mother, Carol, believed that a closed door was a threat, a wall between her and the child she needed to monitor at all times. My bedroom had no lock. If I tried shutting the door, she would knock once and walk right in, as if my room was simply an extension of her own. When I was 13, I learned the bitter taste of betrayal in the form of a little pink diary. It had a flimsy lock, nothing that could stop my mother's determination. One afternoon, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, my diary spread open in her hands. She didn't even look ashamed, just curious, like she was reading a magazine she'd stumbled across. I remember standing frozen, my cheeks burning with humiliation, as she calmly explained, "I need to know what's going on in your life, Lauren. That's how I protect you." From that day forward, I understood a twisted truth in our family. Love and control were the same thing. She opened my mail, listened to my phone calls, even interrogated my friends with a relentless persistence that felt less like concern and more like surveillance. My father, Robert, rarely intervened. He would sigh, maybe mutter something about giving me space, but he never stood in her way. His silence gave her power, turning her into the unquestioned authority of our home. When my brother Jason was born, I was 8 years old, the golden child, the miracle son. He got the same scrutiny I did, but it was packaged with extra privileges. Mom hovered over his schoolwork, his sports teams, his friendships, but her interference always came with an undertone of praise. "Jason needs more support," she would say whenever I complained about the double standard. And with that, my needs were dismissed as less important. I learned to shrink myself, to want less, to expect even less. College was supposed to be my escape. I chose a state university 4 hours away, far enough to force me into the dorms. Those first weeks tasted like freedom. Late nights with friends, sleeping in on weekends. Nobody demanding to know where I was or what I was doing. But freedom never lasted long in my family. By midterms, Mom had somehow befriended my resident advisor, calling her regularly for updates. She made surprise visits twice a month, barging into my dorm with bags of groceries and cleaning supplies, clucking her tongue at my roommate's mess, rearranging my side of the room until it felt like hers again. By the time I graduated, I was exhausted from fighting. When I got a job offer in Chicago, I wanted to take it. I craved that distance. But Mom waged a campaign of worry and guilt that broke me down. "Family stays together," she repeated, her voice trembling with tears. "Someday, when you have kids of your own, you'll thank me." Against my better judgment, I surrendered. I stayed in Columbus. It was always the same pattern. I reached for independence, and they reeled me back in with guilt, tears, or outright pressure. And the worst part? I let them. For years, I let them. But that cycle ended the day I bought my house. I thought about all the interventions over the years, family meetings where my dreams were put on trial. Like the time I suggested moving 30 minutes across town. My Aunt Patricia, my father, Jason, even my cousins all joined forces to remind me how selfish it was to leave the family orbit. Mom wept as though I had threatened to disappear forever. And like always, I folded. I renewed my lease and stayed, but something had shifted. Deep down, I realized independence was never going to be gifted to me. It would have to be claimed, wrestled out of their grip, and defended tooth and nail. That's why, years later, I hunted for a house in complete secrecy. Still, lying awake in my new bedroom, the question pressed in on me. How long before they found out? My mother had a way of uncovering every hidden corner of my life. She called it love. I called it invasion, and as I would soon learn, she was already closer to discovering my secret than I ever imagined. By January, Columbus had settled into its gray, bone-chilling rhythm, the kind of winter where the streets look deserted, where even the wind feels sharp enough to cut. But for me, those icy months carried a secret warmth. Each time I slipped away from my family's reach to tour another house, I felt like I was sneaking gulps of oxygen after years of suffocating. I became two people. By day, I was the dutiful daughter, the financial analyst with tidy spreadsheets and polite small talk at Sunday dinners. By night, and often during stolen lunch breaks, I was a ghost, disappearing into real estate listings, walking through strangers' hallways with a flashlight of possibility in my chest. Diane Miller, my realtor, understood without me having to say much. A woman in her 50s with quick eyes and a dry wit, she never pushed me the way other agents did. After showing me 27 houses, she finally said with a grin. "Lauren, you're not looking for a house. You're looking for sanctuary." She was right. The search was exhausting. Every time I stepped into a property, I imagined my mother trailing behind me, clucking her tongue at the cabinets, measuring windows, declaring the ceiling too low for proper air circulation. I could almost hear Jason saying, "This backyard would be perfect for cookouts," while Amanda chimed in about color schemes. Their voices haunted me until I realized the only way forward was to block them out entirely. And then, one afternoon, I found it. The house sat quietly on a tree-lined street in Oakwood, about 35 minutes from Columbus. A two-story colonial from the 1922, with a weathered charm that spoke to me immediately. The original hardwood floors gleamed under soft winter light. The bay windows seemed to invite me to curl up with a book, and the small backyard felt like an unspoken promise of spring mornings with coffee and silence. I walked through the front door and knew. It wasn't rational, it rarely is with love, but my chest tightened, my throat caught, and I whispered, "This is it." Diane simply smiled. "I've been waiting to hear you say that." The closing process was nerve-wracking. I created a new email account, rented a PO box for all the paperwork, even paid extra for a mobile notary to meet me at a coffee shop so I wouldn't risk running into someone at the title office. The whole thing felt like espionage. I told my boss I had a doctor's appointment, told my family I was swamped with a client meeting, and in that single morning, I signed away my fear and claimed my future. When Diane slid the keys across the cafe table, I stared at them as though they might vanish if I blinked. "Congratulations," she said softly. "This is your space. On your terms." Driving to Oakwood, I kept glancing at the passenger seat where the keys lay gleaming in their plastic fob. My pulse raced, my palms sweated, but underneath the nerves was a quiet triumph. I had done this on my own, no interference, no sabotage. The first night, I carried in just one box. Books. I stacked them in the bay window and sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the winter sunset drip through bare branches outside. The silence wasn't oppressive like it had been in my parents' home, it was sacred. I painted the living room a soft sage green, a color my mother would have hated, and arranged my furniture in ways that made sense only to me. Small rebellions, but every stroke of paint and every misplaced chair felt like planting a flag. This is mine. Of course, the guilt followed close behind. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother. "Have you thought about that little Cape Cod near Jason Street? Perfect for you." I typed polite excuses, my stomach knotting. Each lie felt like another brick in a fragile wall I was building, one that could collapse if she pressed hard enough. Still, I pushed forward. I told myself I'd reveal the house once it felt solidly mine, when the furniture was in place, when the walls had dried, when my confidence could withstand her inevitable storm. I pictured inviting them over for dinner, unveiling the space as a finished masterpiece, daring them to deny my accomplishment. But late at night, as I lay on an air mattress in the empty bedroom, doubt gnawed at me. My mother had ways of finding everything. Secrets didn't last in our family, and I couldn't shake the uneasy question that lingered as I drifted off to sleep. What if she already knew? It was a Wednesday afternoon in late April, one of those rare Ohio days when the chill finally loosens its grip and you catch the first whiff of spring. My boss had canceled a client meeting at the last minute, gifting me an unexpected free afternoon. Normally I would have celebrated with coffee and a long walk, but that day, I wanted nothing more than to drive straight to Oakwood, unlock my door, and enjoy the quiet comfort of my own home. The sun was warm on the windshield as I turned onto my street, humming to myself, already planning to hang the antique mirror I'd found at a thrift store the weekend before. That's when my stomach dropped. 3 cars sat neatly in my driveway. My mother's silver Lexus, Jason's wife Amanda's blue Honda, and a small red sedan I didn't recognize. I slowed the car to a crawl, heart pounding, before circling the block like a thief stalking my own house. Through the living room window, I glimpsed movement shadows shifting against the curtains. I parked around the corner, hands trembling so badly I fumbled my keys twice before locking the car. Moving cautiously along the hedges, I crept toward the dining room window, where a sliver of curtain had been left open. There she was. My mother Carol, standing like a tour guide in her Sunday best, gesturing broadly to Amanda and a stylish blonde I had never met. "The crown molding is original to the house," she said proudly, as though she were the one who had discovered and bought it. My throat went dry. The stranger, later I would learn her name was Brooke, ran her fingers along the china cabinet. "Have you thought about painting this room a deep navy? It would be stunning." Carol laughed lightly, the sound slicing through me. "Lauren is so indecisive. That's why I wanted to show you the space she needs guidance. And your designer's eye will help." I pressed my back against the siding, breath coming fast. My sanctuary, the place I had bled for, saved for, dreamed about, was being passed around like community property. I followed their voices as they moved into the kitchen. Amanda's voice was sharp with disapproval. "The cabinets are dated. And laminate countertops? She'll never entertain properly with this setup." "She'll redo it," Carol said confidently. "Robert and I were planning to gift her some money for her birthday so she can finally update this space." They climbed the stairs, footsteps echoing in the rooms above me. I moved to the back window just in time to hear Brooke casually ask, "How much did she pay for this place?" "Just under 300, my mother answered without hesitation. "She had a good down payment, but I still think she overpaid." The violation slammed into me so hard I had to grip the tree trunk beside me to stay upright. Not only had she entered my home without permission, she knew intimate details of the sale and she was offering them up freely to a stranger. An hour passed like that, me crouched outside while they mapped out my life inside. They critiqued my furniture, planned barbecues for my backyard, talked about where Jason's future kids would play. Each word was a knife, carving away the fragile piece I'd built. Finally, the front door opened. I peeked around the corner just in time to see my mother pulling out a set of keys I had never given her, and locking the door with practiced ease. My vision swam. She had made a copy. She had gone that far. They laughed and chatted as they walked to their cars, blissfully unaware of the storm raging just a few yards away. When their engines faded down the street, I stumbled to my front door, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped my purse. The scent of my mother's perfume clung to the air inside, a ghostly reminder that my privacy had been breached, my sanctuary desecrated. I didn't hesitate. Within the hour, a locksmith was at my door, drilling out the old hardware and installing new locks on every entrance. The first line of defense had been restored, but I knew in my bones this was just the beginning. Because if my mother had a key once, what was to stop her from finding another way back in? The phone started ringing before the locksmith's truck had even left my driveway. I ignored it at first, too shaken to speak, but the calls came again and again, my mother's name flashing across the screen like a siren. By the third call, I picked up, pressing the phone to my ear with hands that still trembled from rage. "Lauren," Carol snapped, her voice sharp with indignation. "I just tried to stop by your house to drop off paint samples and my key doesn't work. Did you change the locks?" The audacity of her words made me laugh, a bitter, humorless sound. "Would you like to explain?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Why you had a key to my house in the first place? Or why you felt entitled to give a tour to Amanda and a stranger while I was at work?" There was silence on the line, heavy and telling. For a moment, I thought maybe she would apologize. Instead, her voice softened into that infuriatingly persuasive tone I'd known all my life. "I don't know why you're so upset. I was proud of your accomplishment. I just wanted to show Amanda and Brooke how beautiful your home was. Brooke is a designer, she had wonderful ideas for your space." "That's not the point, Mom," I said, the volume of my voice rising despite myself. "You didn't have permission to be in my house. You didn't have permission to make a copy of my key. You didn't have permission to share private details about my purchase with anyone." Her scoff sliced through the line. "Brooke is hardly a stranger. She's Denise's daughter, you remember, Denise from church. And besides, we're family. Family doesn't need permission." And there it was, the family gospel I had lived under for decades. Family doesn't need permission. Family doesn't respect boundaries. "That's exactly the problem," I said, my throat tight. "You've never respected my boundaries. Never. From reading my diary to opening my mail. You stole my closing documents out of my apartment, didn't you? That's how you found out about the house." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Finally, She sighed. I was worried. You've been so secretive lately. Missing dinners, ignoring calls. I thought something was wrong. When I saw the envelope from the title company, I was concerned you'd gotten yourself into financial trouble. My stomach turned. She had opened my mail, my private mail. You don't get to justify invading my life by calling it love, I said firmly. This is my home, Mom, and you will remain locked out until you can respect that. Before she could argue, I hung up. It didn't take long for backup to arrive. Barely an hour later, pounding shook my front door. I peered through the peephole to see Jason, my brother, his face red with anger. Open up, Lauren, he barked. We need to talk. I kept the chain latched, cracked the door just an inch. Hello to you too. Mom is at home crying because of you, he shot back. She was just trying to help, and you've humiliated her. I studied his expression. He looked so much like the little boy who once begged Mom for approval, only now he carried her same righteousness. Did she tell you she made a copy of my house key and brought people into my home without permission? For a moment, something flickered across his face. Doubt. But just as quickly, he buried it. She was excited for you. She wanted to help make your house a home. It already is my home, I said quietly. Mine. Not hers to redecorate. Not Amanda's to critique. Not yours to claim for barbecues. Jason shook his head. You've always been like this. Selfish, wrapped up in your need for space. Family is supposed to be involved. No, I said, my voice suddenly calm. That's not involvement. That's control. His jaw tightened. Fine. Have your precious space. But don't come crying to us when you realize how lonely it is up on your high horse. With that, he stormed off, the sound of his car engine roaring down the street. By nightfall, my phone buzzed with messages from relatives. My Aunt Patricia calling me cruel, my cousin Ryan suggesting therapy, even my father, Robert, sending a text urging me to apologize. The narrative was already forming. Lauren the selfish daughter. Lauren the ungrateful one. Lauren who rejected family love. I sat in my living room, tea growing cold in my hands, surrounded by walls painted the color I had chosen, breathing in air that finally felt like mine. But the victory was fragile. Fragile as glass. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. My family had lost their key, but they hadn't lost their determination. And when they couldn't get through the door, they would find other ways to break in. The silence came first. For a family that thrived on constant contact, daily calls, weekly dinners, endless group texts, the sudden quiet felt deafening. Days passed without my phone buzzing with reminders about Sunday meals or updates on my brother's life. At first, I almost welcomed it. No interruptions, no obligations, no guilt. But silence in the Collins family was never peace. It was punishment. My mother, Carol, had mastered the art of the cold shoulder. When her will was defied, she withdrew, not just herself but the entire family network, until you felt the weight of exile pressing down. And sure enough, soon the messages started trickling in not to me, but about me. A coworker, Alyssa, stopped by my desk one afternoon with a puzzled look. I ran into your mom at the grocery store. She seemed really worried about you. Said you'd been acting strange lately, isolating yourself from the family. She even asked if you'd been off at work. Heat crawled up my neck. My mother was expanding the battlefield, recruiting my colleagues into her campaign. I smiled tightly at Alyssa, brushing it off. But inside, fury boiled. This wasn't concern, it was sabotage. The pressure escalated. A week later, I found a large wicker basket sitting on my porch. Inside, burgundy curtains, kitchen towels in colors I disliked, framed family photos I had deliberately chosen not to display. The card read, "Thought these might make your house feel more like home. Family always forgives. Sunday dinner at 5:30. Love, Mom." My stomach turned. Forgiveness wasn't what she was offering, it was control, wrapped in ribbon. That night, I carried the basket to my parents' porch, leaving a note tucked inside. "Thank you. But I've already chosen decor that suits me. I won't be at dinner. Please respect my decision." 2 days later, my Aunt Patricia called, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Lauren, your mother's been to the doctor. She's not well. Stress can be dangerous at her age. Is this really worth risking her health?" I closed my eyes, gripping the phone until my knuckles whitened. Emotional blackmail had always been their sharpest tool. Meanwhile, whispers trickled through the extended family. My cousin Ryan texted me, "Maybe talk to someone?" "You sound paranoid about all this." My father, Robert, sent one of his terse, guilt-laden notes. "You've made your point. Apologize to your mother and let's move forward." Each message was a reminder that the family narrative was already being written without me. Lauren was dramatic. Lauren was selfish. Lauren was rejecting love. The truth that my mother had stolen my mail, copied my key, and waltzed through my private sanctuary was dismissed, minimized, buried beneath a flood of carefully spun stories. The weight of it pressed down until I started questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Was changing the locks too much? Was I the one fracturing the family beyond repair? That's when I found myself sitting across from Dr. Karen Mitchell, a therapist recommended by a colleague. Her office smelled faintly of lavender, the walls painted a calming shade of blue. She listened without judgment as I poured out the whole story, from the pink diary of my childhood to the locks drilled out just days ago. When I finally paused, my voice hoarse, Dr. Mitchell leaned forward. "Lauren, if a friend told you someone had stolen their mail, copied their key, and entered their home without permission, what would you advise them to do?" I blinked at her, caught off guard. "Change the locks. Immediately." She nodded. "Exactly. The fact that the intruder was your mother doesn't make it less serious. It makes it more serious. Boundaries aren't betrayal, Lauren. Boundaries are self-respect." Her words landed like an anchor, steadying me against the storm of guilt. For the first time in weeks, I felt the fog lift. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I was protecting myself in the only way I could. I began to lean on other sources of strength. Diane, my realtor turned confidant, checked in regularly. My coworker Marcus invited me to his weekly game nights, giving me laughter where silence had taken root. Mrs. Harper, my retired teacher neighbor, stopped by with gardening tips and no judgment, just a warm presence. Slowly, I built a circle of chosen connections, people who respected my boundaries instead of trampling them. And yet, at night, when the house was quiet, grief still seeped in. I mourned the mother who could have been proud, the father who could have defended me, the brother who might have seen my side. I mourned the family I'd always wished for, not the one I had. Still, every morning when I turned the new key in the lock, I reminded myself, this house was mine. My space. My rules. But even as I built new walls of resolve, I couldn't shake one gnawing thought. If my brother Jason ever saw the truth for himself, would he finally understand? It was a crisp October afternoon when I heard the knock at my door. Not the impatient pounding of my mother, not the angry thud of Jason demanding entry weeks before, just a steady, hesitant knock. When I opened the door, there he was. Jason, alone. Hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets, eyes uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice didn't carry the usual arrogance. It carried something I hadn't heard in a long time: doubt. I stepped aside, letting him in. He looked around the living room, taking in the sage-green walls, the bookshelves I had built myself, the photographs I had chosen, not the ones my mother had insisted on. "Your place looks nice," he said finally. "Different than I imagined, but nice." We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the distance between us thick with years of unspoken tension. Then Jason took a breath. "I owe you an apology. I should have understood what you were saying about boundaries, but I get it now." And it's dead wise and sighed for hated. I studied his face. What changed? He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Vanessa found out Mom had been going through her things, her journal, some work papers. At first, we thought it was just misplaced. But then Mom made comments she couldn't have known otherwise." Vanessa was furious. She told me either the locks got changed or she was staying with her sister. My chest tightened. The validation I never thought I'd receive hit me like a wave. All those years of being labeled sensitive, dramatic, suddenly the truth was undeniable. Jason's eyes lifted to mine. That's when it hit me. If I was ready to change the locks for my wife, why did I attack you for doing the same thing to protect yourself? His voice cracked just slightly. "You were right, and I'm sorry." The words settled between us, heavy and real. For the first time, I didn't see my brother as the golden child, the chosen one. I saw him as another survivor of the same suffocating love, finally beginning to recognize it for what it was. We talked for hours, peeling back layers of childhood, unspoken resentments, the ways we had both been shaped by our mother's control. By the time Jason stood to leave, something had shifted. He wasn't my opponent anymore. At the door, he turned back. "I think we need help. A mediator. If you're willing, I'll stand with you." For the first time in months, hope flickered in my chest. But if Jason was ready to face the truth, what would happen when our parents were forced to do the same? We met on neutral ground, a bustling cafe in downtown Columbus, the smell of roasted coffee beans masking the tension at our table. My parents sat stiffly across from me, their cups untouched. Beside them was Elaine Foster, the mediator Jason had helped arrange, her calm voice guiding us into territory we had never dared to enter. I spoke first, rehearsed words trembling on my lips. "I love you both. I want you in my life. But if we're going to move forward, I need acknowledgement that entering my home without permission was wrong, and I need clear boundaries respected going forward." For a long moment, silence reigned. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes shiny with tears she refused to let fall. Then my father surprised us all. "Janet," he said softly, using the steady tone I had rarely heard from him. "She's right. What happened was wrong. I need help," Heezer in Terry words. My mother turned sharply, eyes wide. But then something cracked in her expression. She looked at me, her voice breaking. "You're right, Lauren. I should never have copied your key. I should never have walked into your home without asking. I was wrong." The words landed like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For months I had fought, doubted, defended myself against a tide of denial. And here, at last, was truth. Elaine helped us draft an agreement. No visits without explicit invitation. No sharing of my personal information. No decisions made for me. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Weeks later, I hosted a small dinner for my father's birthday, the first family gathering in my home on my terms. There were no surprise tours, no critiques, no whispered plans for my backyard. Just laughter, clinking glasses, and a fragile sense of respect. As my parents prepared to leave, my mother paused at the doorway, her gaze lingering on the sage-green walls she had once insisted I'd regret painting. "You know," she said quietly, "I never would have chosen that color, but seeing it now, I think it suits you perfectly." You know, her words were small, but to me, they felt monumental. Later that night, I sat alone in my garden, breathing in the scent of lavender I'd planted along the fence. A year ago, this space had been the center of a battle. Now it was mine, earned, protected, and shared only by choice. Boundaries had not destroyed my family, they had remade it. And as I locked the door behind me, keys warm in my hand, I knew those locks no longer just kept people out. They reminded me, every day, that this life, this freedom was finally, undeniably,